Hey, thanks for stopping by today. Maybe you've got a new fiber and you need to think about starting to make some jigs for your fiber laser. That's what we're going to cover today. I've got an order for 600 leatherette patches that I need to engrave, and so I've got to determine kind of the breadboard spacing of all these holes and then create a jig from that. So that's what I thought I'd show you today, is how to get your basic breadboard created, and then from that you can make just about any jig you want. It's a lot easier than you might think. So the steps that we're going to go through today is we're going to screw some M6 bolts into our breadboard. We're going to take our digital calipers and we're going to take some measurements both horizontally and vertically on the spacing. We're going to measure the diameter of the M6 bolts, and with that information we're going to jump into lightburn and create this basic shape. So this will be the start of just about any jig that you want to make for your fiber laser. And so we'll jump into lightburn. I'll show you the basics on how to do that. It's going to lay out really quick, and before you know it, you're going to have your breadboard created, and from that you can make just about any jig you need. Let's go ahead and I'll show you how I measure these bolts, and then once we get these measured up, we'll jump into lightburn and get this created. This is a jig I made for these leatherette patches. And so in order to make this jig, I had to figure out the hole spacing of this breadboard, and it's real easy to do. So what I've done is I've screwed in some cap M6 screws here, both so I can get a measurement. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my calipers, I'm going to turn it on here. I like to work in inches, so I'm going to zero it out. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the outside to outside measure for that, and that is 1.21. So I did that horizontally, and then I want to take that same measurement vertically. They should be the same, which they are, 1.21. So we've got our spacing from our outside to outside. So what we're doing is we're measuring this outside to outside dimension. Then what we're going to do is I'll just unscrew one of these, and we'll get our M6 diameter, because that's what the hole spacing needs to be. And we want this, we want them not sloppy, we just want them a little bit snug. And so it looks like to me that we need a hole spacing for this M6 at about 0.23. And so we've got our vertical and horizontal spacing at 1.21. We've got our diameter for our M6 cap screw, which is 0.23. And with those three measurements, we're going to be able to go ahead and create this breadboard. So let's go ahead and jump into lightburn, and you can see how we make this jig. Okay, to get things started, we know that the vertical and horizontal spacing from the outside edges of those M6 bolts was 1.21 inches. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to create a quick square here. I'm going to just pull out this square. We'll just turn it red just so we can see it. And we're going to make sure our aspect ratio, at least initially, is unlocked. We're going to come up here and we're going to go 1.21 tab, 1.21 tab. And now we've got our square. We're going to lock our aspect ratio. And so what this is demonstrating is this is the outside dimension, both vertically and horizontal, of our screws, or our bolts, our M6 bolts. So let's go ahead and make our M6 bolts. So we'll go to our circle tool, hold down the shift key, pull out a quick circle. We can see that it's a perfect circle. We'll change this to 0.23 since that's what we measured it. And now this represents the diameter of each bolt. And what we need to do is we need to put this bolt circle in the corner of this square. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold down the shift key. I'm going to select my square. Oops, got to go back to the select tool. My apologies. And we'll just get it in there. And then we're going to left justify it and top justify it. And now I've got that bolt hole in the top part of my diagram. I'm going to duplicate that, and then I'm going to hold the shift key down, and I'm going to select my square again, and I'm going to right justify it. Now I've got two that are perfectly in those corners. I'm going to come down and I'm going to go ahead and hold both of these. I'm going to right mouse duplicate, and then I'm going to hold down and select the square, and I'm going to put them at the bottom. And so now I've got my round circles that represent my M6 bolts. And what all this square did was make sure that my vertical and horizontal spacings were correct. Now the next thing that I would do is I need to get the center line spacing from the center of this bolt to the center of this bolt. I need to get that spacing for our array tool. That's a value that I've got to key in. So the way we're going to do that is I'm going to turn on my pencil tool, and I'm going to draw a line from the center of this one, and you can see it turns into a little bullseye. And then I'm going to right mouse click to turn that off. I'm going to do another one here and here, just to be able to check my vertical and my horizontal line spacing. And so when you're doing this, you always want to make sure this snap to objects is on. I leave that on pretty much all the time. Now what we can do is we can go to the ruler tool right over here, and we can highlight this segment, and you can see that it's 0.98. If you look at this area right here, segment lengths, when I hover over it, it's 0.98 and it's 0.98 here. So we know that it's pretty much a square. The pattern on this breadboard is square. But we need to remember that 0.98 because we're going to need that number once we get into the array tool. So I've got my basic layout done right now, but before I get too carried away and create the whole breadboard, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and say okay here, get that shut off, come up here, I'm going to turn this, hold the shift key down and turn all of my little helpers here, and I'm just going to turn them to black, or you could turn them into a tool layer, really doesn't matter. And then what I would do is I would come and I would just make another rectangle here, turn it red, and I would cut this little section out on my CO2 laser just to make sure that I can screw these into the breadboard and they fit snug but not too snug, and that the spacing is correct. And if you need to make any adjustments, you can do it with this small section instead of wasting a bunch of wood. So once I cut this out and verify that my hole spacing is right, then I can go ahead and make my entire breadboard. So let's assume that you've done that, you've cut that out, and it's time to make the full-size breadboard. Now that we've got our diameter spacing, we've got our spacing between the two centers, and I think we can go ahead and lay out the main part of this breadboard. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to come over here and duplicate one of these and drag it over here, back it up a little bit. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to the array tool, the rectangular array tool. I'm going to click that, and we're going to move it over here so we can see. And so the first thing that we want to make sure is selected is this radio button right here, distance from the center to center. So we want, when we offset all of these X and Y rows, we want to make sure that it's measuring from the center. And so if I go ahead and go with a spacing of 0.98 in the XY and 0.98 in the Y. Then we should probably be able to go ahead and get our spacing done. So our breadboard is 12 across and 9 down. So we're going to do 12 X columns and 9 Y columns. There we go. We're going to say OK. And then at this point, we can group all these, and we can go ahead and put a perimeter around it. The other thing that I like to do is I wouldn't mind just grabbing a hold of these, making sure these are all grouped, and then just grab this, and this should overlay that, just to make sure we've got our spacing right. And you can see it all lines up perfectly. So I think we're on the right track that way. I'm going to just undo that. And at this point, what I would do is I would come along, and we've already got these holes grouped. I would make my outside perimeter, turn it red because it's going to be a cut. I would go ahead and select my holes, hold the shift key down, select my outside perimeter and center it up. And at this point, what I would do is I would probably cut this out and then test it on my breadboard. And if this is, you can always adjust the size of the perimeter so it fits on there properly. And then it's just a matter of putting this on the breadboard and drawing a rectangle when you're in the fiber laser side, and have it superimpose your maximum cutting area for the lens that you have. And then you just have to make sure that your cutouts are going to be within that particular area. And so I'll show you what I did for my leatherette patches. So I've switched over to my my fiber device, my 60-watt JPT with the 210 millimeter lens. So I've got roughly just a little over 8 inches by 8 inches, and that's the biggest lens I have. I'm planning on getting a bigger lens, but this is as good as it gets. So I know with this 2 3/4 inch patch, I'm only going to be able to get 6 patches done in one fell swoop. So before I lay out my layout on the breadboard that I just created, what I did is I created a rectangle that's pretty much the full size as the maximum working area of that particular lens. And I'm going to superimpose that on the breadboard when it's screwed down to the laser base. And we'll pay attention to kind of where that falls. And based on where that falls, we'll determine kind of where we need to place these. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get this fired up and show you that this is superimposed on the breadboard, and we'll pay attention to where it sits. Okay, so what I've done is I've fired up the 8.3 by 8.3 maximum work area with this particular lens. This is a 290 millimeter lens. And so you can see that basically just, I didn't create the breadboard all the way over here because I've got a air assist bracket that's taken up part of that. So you can see that my work area, based on the way my lens and my work arm is mounted, is it's basically just inside this second row, which would be just the first row in our breadboard, and then one row up from the bottom. So 2 rows over and 1 row up is where my working area is going to be. And I know that I've got to keep my 6 leatherette templates in there. The other reason is you'll notice that I created a place to dig these out. Here, let me get a couple and I'll show you. The reason why I put these little scallops in here is when you have these that are in there and they're all engraved, I don't want to have to be digging at them. I can just take my finger and they come right out. So when you're making things like this, generate these little scallops like this. They make it a lot faster and you're not digging. And then it's just a matter of placing whatever template that you need. And what the beautiful thing about that is you go ahead and make this template, and then you can adjust your layout accordingly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the perimeter, and I'm going to turn on the individual circles, and you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to keep this running, and we're going to just stop that. I'm going to turn on and we'll turn this on. And now you can see, might be a little hard in the video, but it's outlining each one of these circles. And I know that this jig is exactly lined up. If they were off, what I would do is I would individually select one, move it, dial it in. And the good thing about when you're working on a fiber, let's say that this top left-hand one right here wasn't quite right. I could come up here, ungroup this, and just select just one, that top left-hand one, and start it. And you'll notice now that it was just getting this one taken care of. And I could move it in the software. Looks like I got a couple of L's there. Here, there we go. And that'll also give you kind of your layout. So you just do that for each successive one, and that way you can be assured that your lineup is just right. And it's just that easy. Okay, back to our layout. So we had our breadboard layout. When we superimposed the maximum work area on the breadboard, we noticed that the left-hand side was between the second and third row and one row up from the bottom. So when we laid that breadboard down, we knew that this was pretty much what we were looking at. And so what that means is when you're ready to place these 6 circles that we need for our leatherette, they have to stay within this hatched border, or it's going to be outside the work area. So then what I would normally do is I would go ahead and just duplicate these and start placing them. So let's go ahead and turn this on so you can see that. And we know we can't get 3 across, we can only get 2 across. So I'm going to just do a quick and dirty layout here. We know we've got to kind of scrunch them up. And so then we'll take these other 2 and duplicate and grab these and offset them this way so they all fit. And then what I would normally do is I would just group all of these blacks, all of these black rings. Go ahead and group them. And then I would position them accordingly, kind of in the middle of where they all need to be within this hatched area. And at this point then what I would do is I would go in and I would remove all the circles that are within those. And so you would just systematically go in and delete those, put your little scallops in, and turn these red, and then boom, you've got yourself a cutout where you would go ahead and cut it out, screw it to your breadboard, and these 6 circles would be within your work area of the lens that you've got installed. And that's really all there is to it. And so you could make this for just about any kind of product that you make where you're making a lot of them, and so you want to just place them in the jig, hit your foot pedal, and away you go. And so we can go ahead, if we wanted to, we could start erasing these got to ungroup it, sorry. Come in here and we'll just quickly do this. That one's too close. These need to go. These need to go. These need to go. That one's too close. Just getting rid of the ones that I know are going to be a problem for us. Got to use a Control-C to back up sometimes. These ought to go. I got to go. This one's got to go. These 3. These 4. And looks like that's going to be about it. Okay, if I wanted to go ahead and put in those scallops, I could go ahead and just hold down the Shift key, make it at least a ½ inch or better. Right now we'll just make it black just for fun. What I'm going to do, if we have our snaps on, so if I have my snap to objects, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this by the center, and you'll notice it'll snap to the edge, and that's what we want. So we're going to just duplicate that and just move this around to wherever it makes sense for us. One there, maybe one here. I'm going to say one here. We're going to get rid of this one. 2 more, and we've just about got this jig done. One more here. We're going to do that right here. That'll snap there. Duplicate it one more time, and we can do it right up here. Now to join these, you can just go ahead and get those selected. We're going to ungroup them because we want to do this one at a time. Group those 2 and weld it. Group these 2, weld it. These 2, we're just welding here, guys, nothing special. And at this point, that's all done. So then what we would do is we would go ahead, and I'm just going to get rid of this. I don't need this anymore. I'm going to go, I want to select everything black, so I'm going to come up here to my layer. I'm going to hold the Shift key down and select the black layer. That's going to select everything black in my template. I'm going to go ahead and turn it red because it needs to be in my cut layer. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along here and group them all. And at this point, if I switch to my CO2, my Thunder 35 100 watt, now I can take this right here and I can cut this template out, and I will have a template so I can go ahead and systematically cut out 6 leatherette patches at a time. Okay, this is the fruits of our labor. We've got this jig cut out. I've got 6 leatherette patches cut out from a sheet of leatherette. You notice there's no stitching, and it's because these are 2 3/4 inches in diameter, which they don't commercially make. So we're going to pull the trigger on this, and you can see how it engraves. Going to get a little bit noisy. I'm going to turn on the air assist. And let's get them knocked out. Oh, turn this off. We've got, like the edges are all nice and done. We'll get them wiped off. Jig worked real good. I also put a cricket sticky mat underneath here to hold these leatherette patches down. That also works really well. I hope this information was helpful. If you like the content, I'd sure appreciate a like. If you haven't done so, please subscribe. And if you have the ability, I'd sure appreciate a thanks and contribute to the channel. That means a lot. I sure appreciate it. We've just hit 17,000 subscribers, I believe, yesterday. Very excited about that. I truly appreciate all the support. Thanks and have a great day.